Hello everybody and welcome to the channel. So, my first ever video commentary, the new idea I had for the channel for the new year. I know for a fact that I'll be posting this after January 1st, but seeing as it's still January, I'll still consider this as a new year. I mean, hell, January 1st is just a few days back. So for a very first video, why not talk about a brand new game called Marvel Rivals and how this game may dominate over Overwatch and at the same time may not. So quick disclaimer, seeing as this is going to be my first video commentary with regards to any topic whatsoever, I'm most likely going to be making mistakes and possibly bad takes. And second, my thought process and how I approach video commentaries, I've already discussed in the previous video. I'll put it on the info card that I think is on the top right of the video so that you can watch that and get a grasp of things. So to start things off, let's talk about Marvel Rivals' sudden rise to fame. And I do mean sudden because at the start, as it was released, it has already overshadowed Overwatch in terms of all-time peak. And while I don't necessarily like to use player counts to determine whether or not a game is good, this is because more often than not, I actually play indie games rather than AAA studio games. And those games don't necessarily have a huge player count to begin with anyway. With that in mind, let's talk about the gameplay then and how it is both similar and different from Overwatch, and possibly that difference could be the determining factor as to why this game is far more popular than Overwatch itself. So in a nutshell, this game is a 6v6 hero first-person shooter similar to how Overwatch is previously. Now they removed it, they made it a 5v5 but brought it back as a new feature. It's confusing. And while that is confusing, how you play Overwatch and by extension games that follow this exact formula isn't that confusing, like how the abilities work or how characters work and such. And instead of talking about the gameplay, like how the game works in all three games, and yes, I have a third game to compare, I would rather just talk about the features that Marvel Rivals and the third game has over Overwatch and how these features define their games and how it makes their games much more unique and honestly in most cases better than Overwatch itself. And I guess the first thing that you would notice the moment you stepped into the game itself is that all of the characters are immediately unlocked for you. And while normally this kind of feature kind of flies under the radar most of the time, for me it hasn't, because I think this is actually a good approach, mainly because you can actually immediately try out all of the characters and see which suits your playstyle. And it could also provide a level playing field because it prevents like high level players from constantly picking that character, like an overpowered character or even just borderline a powerful character, right? Because this allows a new player to have a little bit of a leg up over someone who's has like hundreds of hours of game time, and failing that, at the very least they could prevent someone who does have that insane amount of hours to not get that and basically destroy them with it. And while characters are all unlocked, not all game modes are unlocked. However, it is only one game mode and that is competitive, and I don't see this being a downside whatsoever. I think it's a plus side because it prevents newer players from immediately going to ranked matches. And if you ever played any competitive games, I think the worst one for me at least was in CSGO, because if you played their competitive slash ranked matches, holy shit, is it an absolute sweat fest. So I don't think that is necessarily the problem. I think it's fine as is. In fact, I think this game has more game modes than all unlocked game modes in Overwatch itself. Not to mention they have custom matches that you can do, which is pretty amazing if you ask me. So the second feature that I noticed was the Levolutions that is present on the game. And if you don't play Battlefield, you may wonder what I meant by Levolutions. Levolutions is what Battlefield players call when you do certain amount of task or certain amount of damage to buildings and whatnot, and it changes the map entirely. So one good example of this Levolution mechanic is Siege of Shanghai, where if you destroy like the supports of the skyscraper, it actually crashes down all the way to the riverbed, where it changes the map to do almost like 3 things at the same time. The first one, it prevents a good position for the enemy, where you can be a sniper, an anti-air, or even an anti-tank role, and you'll be in a position that can do all of that with relative impunity. The second one is that there are weapons in the tower that you cannot get in your loadout whatsoever, and some of them are actually pretty powerful, and now they're pretty much gone. And the third noticeable is that you no longer need to swim or only have a boat in order to go across the water. You can just walk or drive through it, which sometimes gives a tactical edge. So that's pretty much it with regards to what Levolutions is. I'm going to end it here because I'm not going to be talking about Battlefield. This is not a Battlefield oriented video. This is a Marvel Rivals and, you know, Overwatch and pretty much everything else oriented video. And you can always check out like all of these Levolution concept in Battlefield games by, you know, watching videos about it or playing games like from Battlefield 3 up to Battlefield 5. Don't touch Battlefield 2048 because they don't necessarily have good Levolutions. As I remember, their Levolutions were dog shit. And let's talk about the Levolutions featured in the Rivals. So I'll be showing some clips here of me playing as Black Widow, and you can see how some part of the buildings have been destroyed, like the walls, which prevents me to have like a good cover, which is detrimental for a sniper. And in this other clip where you can see the whole bridge collapsing, which brings me down. And these type of Levolutions bring immersion to the game because you are forced to think tactically and most cases to think on the move as fast as possible. And for me, I feel like this is a good thing because it makes the entire map very immersive and very unpredictable in this case. And as for the third feature that I noticed is what I call the Battle Buddy system. I know it's called something like Team Up, but I still like to call it as Battle Buddy system because
got you covered, Battle Buddy. Oh no!
Yeah, that's pretty much it, really. So what does this feature do? What this means is that all characters have someone they're linked to, and you get certain bonuses when those linked characters are present in the team. So one good example here would be Iron Fist, because I have footage of that exact thing happening when me and my friend were playing, and you can see that as Iron Fist I gain some bonuses. And as for my friend who was playing, I think Luna Snow, he gained certain bonuses for that character as well. So essentially that's what the Battle Buddy system is. There are times where it may require 3 characters, but in most cases this is how it works. Now let's talk about Overwatch, the so-called OG of the first-person shooter, hero shooter I would say. However, for me at least, I still do not think that is true. At least for me, because this game is still deep in my heart, where I still have fond memories of playing it on 10 FPS on a Pentium dual core CPU business computer, and that 10 FPS is the max at best. And if you're not still aware what I'm talking about, and that would be Team Fortress 2. And talk about shit timing, my parents just walked into my room as I'm doing this part of the video, and now I have a very awkward conversation. So in any case, let's talk about Overwatch then. So first things first, the thing I noticed is that you cannot skip the tutorial. Although I'm not entirely sure if you can skip the tutorial in Rivals. I think you can, but I'm not too sure. I unfortunately lost that footage, but I do remember that you can. And while yes, you can see me here that I did say no thanks to the tutorial, essentially skipping it, you can also notice how I am technically being forced to do the tutorial, otherwise I won't be able to play the game, as minimal as it already is. And on the subject of minimal features, while I don't necessarily care too much about the whole drama with regards to Blizzard and their promises and whatnot, I just think that having all of their game modes aside from unranked being locked behind what I can say is a game progression in this case, meaning like you need to play X amount of games before you can unlock those things. I wouldn't say it's criminally bad, but it is definitely a mild annoyance. And we can't necessarily forget about the characters being locked behind a level wall and possibly even a paywall, and I can't really judge it too hard for that case because there are some upsides for these kind of scenarios. I think one mainly is that it rewards players. It feels like rewarding for a player who played that long. And again, there are some upsides and downsides to everything. And for my third gripe in a sense would be the 5v5, which also ties into the unbalanced nature of the game. And character imbalance isn't necessarily limited to Overwatch. In fact, there are loads of them in Rivals. In fact, I'll be talking about this character in a future video because of how broken this motherfucker is. The thing I did notice was that tank units are really, really powerful. And I noticed while I was playing this game to get some footage is that some matches will have like 2 or 3 tank units and some support, which means if you play anything other than those 2 classes, it's going to be rough for you for a new player. While I am not new to Overwatch, I don't necessarily have the game like the first one. I did play a couple of games when it was at one point it was free, but by and large I don't have Overwatch 1 because I was broke and don't have a credit card. And when I no longer have those nerves, I found out that Overwatch 2 is gonna be free to play and they're gonna shut down Overwatch 1 after that, so what's the point? But drama aside, there is something good about Overwatch, and that would be that the base game itself is actually pretty fun. It's pretty smooth, the graphics are nice. I would say it's still a nice experience to have, however, it does feel lacking. And before you say, oh, it's because this is an older game and of course Rivals would have more features, and you would be right. It is an old game and of course the new game would have more features than the old one. However, this third game that I'm about to talk about not only was made only a couple of months after Overwatch was released, it is also still playable till this day and has probably more features than Overwatch 2 has, and that game is newer than this game, and that game would be Paladins. So in a nutshell, this game was supposed to be the competitor to Overwatch where it is free and it's on Steam, because originally Overwatch wasn't on Steam, so there is no way to purchase the game using Steam Wallet Cash, which is a very common way to buy games for a 16-year-old who doesn't have access to a credit card or even a debit card, really. And I think that was the appeal that the studio was going for, Hi-Res Studios was going for. And unfortunately, not a lot of people know about this game because they didn't spend that much money on marketing. But I do think that the money that they do generate have been going back to the game itself, because remembering how I used to play it back in 2016 and how I play it today, there is like a massive shift on the, I would say, quality of life. The graphics, however, is a little bit dated, but I don't see that as a bad thing in a game. I mean, they're still using Unreal Engine 3, so updating the graphics may not be possible, but I don't see that as a bad thing because I don't necessarily equate good graphics as good games. So what does this game have that sets it apart from Overwatch? The first thing you would notice is that this game has the same problem as Overwatch, where the characters are locked behind either a paywall or a level cap. However, I cannot attest to the game modes because I do not remember whether or not you got them unlocked right out the gate, because it has been a while since, you know, when I first played this, and I've already logged into this account before I actually checked. And so now I can't really attest to that part. So instead of that, let's talk about the customization of the character. And I don't necessarily mean the skins. So in Paladins, you have like 3 effects that you can choose immediately. And I'll show you what I mean by that right this instance. And after that, you can go ahead and pick a collection of cards which has like its own effects. You can also build these cards sort of like what you can do in Hearthstone, and these effects will be carried throughout the entire game. On top of that is that after you've done that, you also have this like Dota 2 or League of Legends item shop, where just like in Dota 2 or League of Legends, you can gain currency in the match and you use that currency to buy items or upgrades for your character. And the last feature that I wish both games would have, that this game have, are horses. So what these horses do is that it allows you to go into the battle faster, as it's much more faster to take the horse and ride it all the way to the battlefield rather than having to walk. And in some rare cases of characters sprint, it just makes, you know, when you die a little bit more tolerable rather than having to go at the battlefield slowly, especially when you do sieges. You know, when you have to do escort this or defend that, it's very annoying. And while I would like to talk more about this game, I think that would be on its own video instead in the future, because this video is going longer than I expected already. So let us talk about my final thoughts about the future of Overwatch and Marvel Rivals as well. So what do I think about Overwatch being, you know, overthrown by Marvel Rivals in terms of the amount of players in their same genre? Well, that would be an undeniable truth, because just from the player numbers alone, the all-time peak of Rivals is almost 10 times that from Overwatch. In fact, maybe in a few more days, that might actually be the possibility. As a matter of fact, if you look at the screenshots current player online, it is miles ahead than Overwatch's peak as well, let alone their current online numbers. So in the short term, yes, they have basically beaten Overwatch. Let us not forget that there are also a handful of people who consume Marvel content via comics or TV shows or movies, and they may not have started playing this game, and these are still people who may want to play the game. However, if you notice, I did emphasize on the fact that it's short term, and there are reasons for this. This is because maybe in 2 to 3 months time we may see changes that the player base won't like. In fact, in this Reddit post, some people actually talk about how NetEase, the developers of Marvel Rivals, have a sort of a bad reputation with regards to making games, where they would publish quite a lot of fairly decent games. However, they may not necessarily maintain them, and by maintaining it could mean multiple things, like they could be way too greedy with microtransactions, or they just don't care about the game that they release, so they won't put in any effort on updating or whatsoever. There's like this Reddit thread is a little bit longer, so you can read through this. I'll post the link in the description below so that you can read it for yourself. The second reason is that Blizzard still exists, and while yes, it is also Blizzard's fault why Overwatch met its own demise, or at least about to meet its own demise, they can still bounce from this if they actually start putting in the effort of making the game better. This game should serve as a wake-up call to Blizzard, mainly because they were under the assumption that no matter what they did, people are still going to be playing their games. There is literally no competition, even though Paladins does exist, but nobody knows about them. But now that there is a genuine competition that basically destroyed them, this may provide as a wake-up call for Activision to tell Blizzard to start making this game better as an actual competitor. Because if we know anything about like Microsoft in this case, because Microsoft owns Activision Blizzard, is that Microsoft have no problems with cutting off studios that doesn't make any profit, and even if they made profit for some damn reason, they would still cut them. It's such a weird company. But I would rather have the chance of retaining the company rather than the definite possibility of being completely shut down by Microsoft. The third reason is that this is a brand new game. I'm not exactly repeating the first one, however, it is still worth mentioning that on new games, they would tend to have a high amount of player count, and after like a few months when the hype is already died down, it will naturally decline. A great example would be Helldivers 2, and a massive example would be Palworld, because look at this. I mean, god damn, it has like an all-time peak of 2 million players at one point. Chart alone looks like it's already about to break the light barrier. Yes, not the sound barrier, the light barrier, with how steep that thing is. But if you can see, it has really dropped in player count over time, because after the hype has died down, a lot of players move on to the other things, or they have something else to do. There's a lot of reasons, and I could see this happening to Marvel Rivals as well. And as for the last reason, is something I see it as maybe like a small possibility, but a possibility nonetheless. And as much as I don't want to bring politics into my channel, because I really don't want to deal with that, I gotta have to talk about politics for this reason. The reason being is that NetEase is a Chinese-based company, and again, I won't be discussing like the political implications or whatnot, right? That is for other channels to deal with. That's not gonna be this channel, and this game has the possibility to being banned because of that. And again, that is like a small chance. However, I still see it as a possibility on the table, mainly because of what happened to TikTok, where I think the general public no longer has access to TikTok, because I think the American government have already passed the bill to ban it, or at the very least that bill is still on the table and just awaiting or something, right? So I could see this happening, especially if NetEase was bought out by Tencent, because Tencent is really massive, especially in China, so they could have possibly been bought out by Tencent already. And I do believe that Tencent may be on the American government's radar soon. And even if they're not bought out by Tencent, it's still a possibility that the American government will still look into, and that may actually have a profound effect on the game. And again, I do not want to delve into politics. It's just something that I observed, and hopefully it wouldn't, but there is a chance that it may happen. And I would also like to add in a quote from Nikita Khrushchev that artists will crank out art like there were sausages from a factory. I mean, on a certain website that if you know, you know. Like at the release, there has been like around 200 to 300 pieces of art, and I think it was like a couple of minutes ago. And now it's up to 5,000 pieces of art, almost catching up to Paladins, and definitely far behind to Overwatch, but that's because Overwatch has been there for quite a while already. And yeah, that's the end of the video, so thank you for sticking out all the way to the end. Really, I greatly appreciate it. And I know it's a little bit longer than what I expected, and you probably also expected, and I hope in the future it wouldn't be this long. Hopefully in the next video it wouldn't take this long. And if you think I missed some points or I essentially made a bad take, do tell me in the comment section and maybe we can discuss more about it. And while we're at it, if you like the content, do drop a like and possibly subscribe to the channel, as it helps the channel grow. It also helps my motivation grow. And while waiting, may I recommend you my other videos that I make, because I make quite a variety of videos. So yeah, that's pretty much it, and I'll see you guys next time.